I'm Madison, 28, and I never imagined family could hurt worse than my shattered tibia 2 days after a drunk driver T-boned my car. I lay alone in the hospital, drugged and terrified. Parents had chosen my sister Bailey's college orientation instead. You'll heal, but your sister's future is time-sensitive. Mom texted hours later. They sent a selfie, them beaming beside Bailey's dorm room, captioned, "So proud of our baby girl starting her journey." That moment changed everything I decided. Their priorities needed a serious adjustment. Where are you watching from today? Hit that subscribe button and like this video if you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your family. Trust me. What happens next will show you exactly how I transformed family betrayal into the wake-up call my parents never saw coming. Growing up, Bailey and I existed in different universes. Despite sharing the same household, I was the rule follower, the responsible one who maintained a 4.0 GPA, never missed curfew, and helped with dinner without being asked. Bailey, 3 years younger, operated under entirely different rules. She was the firecracker, the social butterfly who could charm her way out of any trouble with a laugh and quick excuse. Bailey's just spirited mom would say, "When my sister came home 2 hours past curfew, she's finding herself. When I was 16, I saved for 6 months to buy a secondhand laptop for schoolwork." When Bailey turned 16, our parents surprised her with a brand new MacBook Pro because she needed it for her photography hobby. The pattern was established early. Bailey received, I earned. My high school graduation fell on the same weekend as Bailey's regional soccer tournament. Guess which event my parents attended? I received my diploma, with only my elderly grandmother in the audience, while my parents cheered Bailey's team 3 states away. "We're so sorry, Madison," Dad said over the phone that night, not sounding sorry at all. But this tournament could lead to college scouts noticing Bailey. "Your graduation is just a ceremony. You still got the diploma, right?" Despite the constant overlooking, I excelled. I worked through college with minimal financial help from my parents, earning scholarships and taking night shifts at the campus library. I graduated with honors and secured a position as a physical therapist at Memorial Hospital. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my life helping others heal, while my own wounds festered beneath the surface. Apartment became my sanctuary. A small 1-bedroom in a renovated Victorian house with hardwood floors and large windows. I filled it with secondhand furniture. I'd lovingly restored plants that thrived under my care and books that provided the wisdom my parents never did. Every item represented something I'd earned through my own efforts. Meanwhile, Bailey dropped out of 3 different college programs each time, resulting in tearful family meetings where my parents reassured her it was okay to find her path. Each program came with new equipment, new housing, new expenses, all covered by our parents. When I pointed out the disparity during one such meeting, my mother actually said, "Bailey needs more support. Madison, you've always been so independent," as if my independence had been a choice and not a necessity. Still, I maintained the family peace I showed up for holidays, remembered birthdays, and listened to my parents' endless stories about Bailey's latest adventures. I drove 3 hours to help Bailey move between apartments when she decided her roommate's energy was too intense. I held my tongue when my parents forgot my birthday but threw Bailey an elaborate surprise party 2 months later. "Family comes first," my mother always said, though it became increasingly clear that in their eyes, Bailey was more family than I was. I didn't resent my sister, not really. Bailey was just playing the game according to the rules our parents had established. She'd been cast as the star, and I was the supporting character. What hurt was how readily my parents had assigned these roles and how stubbornly they maintained them even as we entered adulthood. When I received a promotion to senior therapist last year, I called my parents with the news. Dad answered, listened for approximately 30 seconds, then interrupted. "That's great, honey, but can I call you back? Bailey just sent us photos from her backpacking trip in Thailand, and they're amazing." He never called back. That was our family dynamic, a constant orbiting around Bailey's son. While I existed in the cold outer reaches of the solar system, I had accepted this reality so completely that I no longer expected anything different. Perhaps that's why what happened after my accident hit me so hard. Even from the farthest reaches of space, you can still feel the shock of a meteor impact. The night, everything changed. Started like any other. I had just finished a late shift at the hospital, having covered for a colleague who needed to attend her son's school play. It was nearly midnight, and a light rain had started to fall, creating halos around the streetlights. As I walked to my car, I remember thinking about stopping for groceries, then deciding it could wait until morning. That small decision to drive straight home instead of to the 24-hour supermarket might have saved my life. I was 10 minutes from my apartment waiting, at a red light on Maple and 4th when I saw headlights approaching in my rearview mirror. They were moving too fast. Swerving slightly, I remember reaching for my seatbelt, a reflexive check even, though I always wore it. The light turned green. I pressed the accelerator. I never saw the pickup truck that ran the red light from the cross street. The impact came from the driver's side, a violent explosion of metal glass and airbags. My car spun across the intersection, the world outside a blur of rain and streetlights. When it finally stopped, I was facing the wrong direction, my leg pinned beneath the crumpled dashboard. The pain hit seconds later, white-hot and all-consuming. I could hear someone screaming and realized distantly it was me. Then came the voices, concerned bystanders, someone calling 911, someone else telling me not to move. The rain fell through my shattered window, mixing with the blood on my jeans. The paramedics arrived quickly, I remember, fragments of their conversation as they worked to stabilize me before extraction compound fracture, significant blood loss, possible internal injuries. They administered something for the pain and the world became mercifully fuzzy. At the hospital, things moved with urgent efficiency. Scans confirmed what the paramedics suspected. My tibia had broken. Through the skin requiring immediate surgery, I had also suffered 3 broken ribs, a concussion, and numerous lacerations before they wheeled me into the operating room. I managed to tell the nurse to call my parents. They'll be here. I remember saying with absolute certainty, they'll come. The surgery lasted 4 hours as orthopedic surgeons worked to piece my shattered leg back together with titanium rods and screws. When I finally emerged from anesthesia, in the recovery room, my first blurry thought was to look for my parents. The room contained only medical staff and machines. Did my parents call? I asked the recovery nurse, my voice raspy from the intubation tube. Let me check, honey, she said kindly. She returned minutes later, with a gentle expression that immediately told me the answer. They called. They said they're out of town for your sister's college orientation and can't make it back right now. They asked to be kept updated on your condition. The pain medication couldn't touch the hurt that bloomed in my chest. I closed my eyes, fighting tears. Later that afternoon, from my hospital bed, I called my parents. Directly, Mom answered on the 4th ring, the sound of laughter and conversation in the background. Madison, how are you feeling? The hospital said the surgery went well. I've been better, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. When are you coming? A pause. I could hear her cover. The phone speaking to someone else, my father. Presumably when she returned, her voice had that artificially bright quality she used when delivering bad news. Honey, we're at Bailey's orientation. It's a 3-day program, and we've already paid for the hotel. You know how important this is. It's her 4th attempt at college, and we need to make sure she gets settled properly this time. Mom, I was in a car accident. I had major surgery. I'm alone in the hospital. I know, sweetie, and we're so sorry, but the doctor said you're stable, right? Bailey needs us right now. This is time sensitive. You'll heal, but your sister's future depends on getting a good start here. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So, you're not coming. We'll come as soon as orientation is over. I promise. Maybe in 3 or 4 days. Your dad is trying to see if we can move some things around, but Bailey's really nervous about this. New school, and we don't want to abandon her right now. Abandon her. The irony was, like acid in my throat. I understand, I said, though I didn't. I have to go. The nurse needs to check my vitals. It was a lie, but I couldn't bear to hear any more. Justifications. After hanging up, I stared at the ceiling, trying to process what had just happened. The pain in my leg throbbed in time with my heartbeat, but it was nothing compared to the hollow feeling in my chest. The hospital staff noticed my distress. My primary nurse, Carolyn, brought me extra blankets and sat with me during her break. Another nurse helped me call Amber, a co-worker, who had become a close friend over the past 2 years. Amber arrived within the hour, her face tight with concern and anger when I explained why my parents weren't there. That's messed up. Madison, seriously messed up. It's fine, I said automatically, the response. I'd been programmed to give my entire life when faced with my parents' behavior. Bailey needs them more. Amber looked at me for a long moment. No, she doesn't, and it's not fine. She stayed with me that night, sleeping uncomfortably in the recliner beside my bed, leaving only briefly to feed her cat and grab fresh clothes. She helped me wash my face, brought me real food to supplement the hospital meals, and made me laugh despite everything. This is what family actually does, she told me as she combed my tangled hair. The next morning, they show up. The next day was a blur of pain management, doctor visits, and the first excruciating attempts at movement. The orthopedic surgeon explained that while the surgery had been successful, my recovery would be long and difficult, 6 weeks. Non-weight bearing followed by months of physical therapy. As a physical therapist, myself, I understood exactly what lay ahead. The painful progression, the setbacks, the slow rebuilding of strength and function. What I didn't anticipate was facing it essentially alone. My parents called that evening a brief check-in where they spoke more about Bailey's dorm room and orientation activities than my condition, I answered. Their questions mechanically too tired to feel much of anything she's meeting. Such interesting people, Mom gushed. Her roommate is from Seattle and plays the cello. That's nice, I said, watching the 4 drip medication into my arm, and the campus is beautiful. Her dorm is newly renovated with these cute study pods in the hallways. I closed my eyes. I'm glad she likes it. We're taking her shopping tomorrow for dorm supplies. She needs so many things. A mini fridge, new bedding, a desk lamp. I didn't bother mentioning that I needed things to help bathing assistance with pain management, emotional support. What would be the point? After the call, I tried to sleep but couldn't. The night stretched, endlessly punctuated by vitals checks and pain medication administration. I lay awake, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, listening to the beeping of machines and occasional voices in the hallway. The message arrived at 10:23. The next morning, my phone chimed with a text notification from my mother. I opened it, expecting perhaps an update on when they might visit. Instead, I found a photo. My parents and Bailey, all 3 beaming at the camera, standing in what was clearly a college dorm room. Bailey was making a peace sign. My father had his arm around her shoulders, and my mother was holding up a college-bound banner. The caption read, "So proud of our baby girl starting her journey." I stared at the image, unable to process what I was seeing. There was no mention of me, no acknowledgement that their other daughter was lying in a hospital bed with a shattered leg. Just celebration, as if nothing else in the world mattered beyond Bailey's 4th attempt at college. Something broke inside me then. Something fundamental. That had been cracking for years, but had somehow held together through sheer determination. The nurse found me sobbing, uncontrollably. The phone still clutched in my hand, my body shaking so violently that my leg brace rattled against the bed rail. They had to sedate me. When I woke hours later, Amber was back, her expression a mixture of concern and barely contained fury. She held my hand while I explained what had happened, showing her the selfie that had finally broken me. "I've always known I was second place," I whispered, "but I didn't think I meant nothing." "You don't," Amber said firmly. "You mean everything to a lot of people, just not to them, and that's their loss." I scrolled through years of similar incidents stored in my memory. Parents missing my college graduation because Bailey had a minor fender bender the night before. Them forgetting my 30th birthday, but throwing an elaborate surprise party for Bailey's 27th. My father cutting short my phone call about a promotion because Bailey was sending vacation photos. "It's always been like this," I said, my voice hollow. When I needed braces as a teen, they made me get a job to pay half because it was cosmetic, but they paid for Bailey's full orthodontic treatment the next year, without question. When I got into physical therapy school, they said they couldn't help with tuition because they were financially strained, then bought Bailey a car the same month. Amber listened, her face growing increasingly troubled. "Madison, this isn't normal. This isn't what parents do. It's what my parents do." "Well, they suck," Amber said bluntly, "and you deserve better." The hospital's social worker stopped by that afternoon, concerned about my emotional state. Dr. Patel was a kind woman with gentle eyes who sat beside my bed and simply listened as I poured out 30 years of being the less favored child. "What you're describing is a long-standing pattern of differential treatment," she said when I finally ran out of words. "It's not uncommon in families, but that doesn't make it any less harmful. I've tried so hard to be okay with it." I said, to be the bigger person. "Perhaps it's time to prioritize your own well-being," she suggested. "Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary boundaries," I repeated, tasting the word. It had never occurred to me that I was allowed to have boundaries with my parents. Later that night, after the nurses had dimmed the lights and the hospital had settled into its quieter nighttime rhythm, I made a decision. I was done being the good daughter who accepted scraps of attention, done making excuses for my parents' behavior, done pretending it didn't hurt. For the first time in my life, I decided to put myself first, and that meant stepping away from the people who had always put me last. 3 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. Since my apartment had stairs and no elevator, staying there alone was impossible. Amber immediately offered her ground a floor or guest room. It's yours for as long as you need it, she insisted, already rearranging furniture to accommodate my wheelchair and eventual walker. My parents called the morning of my discharge, finally heading home after Bailey's extended orientation, and I let the call go to voicemail. I texted a brief response. Being discharged today, staying with a friend? We'll be in touch when I'm ready. Then I turned off my phone. The next 4 weeks were focused entirely on healing, both my body and my spirit. Amber helped me settle into her guest room, which she transformed with small touches to make me feel at home. My favorite throw blanket retrieved from my apartment, fresh flowers on the nightstand, a stack of books I'd been meaning to read. With Amber's help and the assistance of a home health nurse who visited 3 times a week, I navigated the challenges of early recovery, the awkward sponge baths, the painful exercises, the frustration of dependence. As a physical therapist, I knew exactly what my body needed to heal, but experiencing it firsthand was humbling. By week 2, I felt strong enough to turn my phone back on. The notifications were overwhelming. 27 missed calls from my parents, 40-plus text messages, several voicemails, and even emails. The tone evolved from casual checking in to increasingly frantic. Concerned, Madison, call us when you get this. Why aren't you answering? Where? Worried. This isn't like you. Please respond. We're getting very concerned. We don't hear from you soon. We'll have to call the hospital. Madison, this isn't funny anymore. We're your parents. You can't just ignore us. I read through them, all but responded to none. Bailey had also texted several times her messages, more tentative. Hey sis, how are you feeling? Mom and Dad said you're not answering them. I hope you're okay. Let me know if you need anything. Madison, I'm really worried about you. Please just let someone know you're all right. To Bailey alone. I sent a brief reply. I'm physically safe and recovering. I need space from Mom and Dad right now. This isn't about you. She responded immediately. I understand. Take the time. You need, love you. It was the first indication that perhaps Bailey wasn't entirely blind to our parents' behavior. As the silence continued, my parents' messages grew increasingly desperate. They contacted the hospital, which couldn't provide information due to privacy laws. They called my workplace, where my supervisor, whom I'd briefed on the situation, politely informed them I was on medical leave and suggested they respect my privacy. In week 3, they showed up at Amber's door. I was resting in the bedroom when I heard the doorbell, followed by my mother's voice. Amber had been expecting this. We discussed the possibility and had a plan. I texted her. From the bedroom, I don't want to see them. Amber handled it perfectly. She stepped outside, closing the door behind her to prevent them from looking in or attempting to enter. Madison is safe and recovering, I heard her say firmly. She's not ready to see you right now and has asked for space. We're her parents. My father protested, his voice rising. We have a right to see her. No, you don't, Amber replied calmly. Madison is an adult who has requested privacy during her recovery. I'm respecting that wish, and I'm asking you to do the same. This is ridiculous, my mother said. Madison, honey, we know you can hear us. We came all this way. Amber's voice remained steady. Coming all this way now doesn't change the fact that you weren't there when she needed you most. Madison will contact you when she's ready. Please don't come back unannounced. It's not helpful to her recovery. They left reluctantly, but not before my mother called through the door. This isn't like you, Madison. We don't understand why you're doing this. That was the problem. They didn't understand, had never understood how their behavior affected me. While maintaining my silence with my parents, I focused on strengthening my support network. Colleagues from the hospital organized a meal train. My neighbor fed my plants and collected my mail. Friends I hadn't spoken to in months reached out after hearing about the accident, and many showed up with practical help or simply companionship. I discovered that I had built a chosen family over the years, people who showed up not out of obligation but genuine care. The realization was both healing and heartbreaking. Why had I spent so many years chasing the approval of parents who consistently placed me second when I had people who put me first without being asked? By week 4, I was making good physical progress. I had transitioned from the wheelchair to a walker for short distances, and the surgical site was healing well. My emotional healing was progressing too, aided by twice-weekly sessions with a therapist who specialized in family trauma. What do you want from your relationship with your parents moving forward? Dr. Chin asked during one session. I don't know if I want one at all, I admitted. But if we do have a relationship, it has to be different. They need to understand what they've done and take responsibility for it. No more excuses. No more Bailey first and always. And if they can't do that, I considered the question, then maybe it's better to have no relationship than a harmful one. It was a revelation. The understanding that no relationship was preferable to a damaging one even. With parents, the silence had given me clarity I'd never had before. For the first time, I was seeing my family dynamic from the outside, rather than from within the fog of emotional manipulation I'd lived in for decades. After 5 weeks of silence, I felt ready to face my parents. Not because I'd forgiven them, but because I was strong enough now to set boundaries without crumbling. I texted my mother, "I'm ready to talk. Coffee shop on Main Street Thursday at 2 p.m. Just the three of us." Her response was immediate. "We'll be there. We love you so much." I didn't reply. Love wasn't supposed to hurt like this. The coffee shop was my strategic choice. Public enough to discourage dramatic scenes, private enough for honest conversation and neutral territory that gave me the psychological advantage of choosing the battlefield I arrived 20 times. Minutes early, securing a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. Amber had dropped me off parking nearby with a promise to be just a phone call away if needed. My parents arrived 10 minutes, early, looking anxious and older than I remembered. My mother's eyes were puffy, her hair less perfectly styled than usual. My father's shoulders were hunched, his expression weary. They spotted me immediately and my mother rushed toward the table. "Madison?" "Thank God," she said, reaching for me. I held up a hand, stopping her. "Please, sit down. I'm not ready for hugs." She recoiled slightly, hurt flashing across her face, but complied. My father followed silently, pulling out a chair across from me. "You look well," he offered cautiously. "How's the leg healing?" "As expected," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. 6 weeks of physical therapy ahead, but the bone is mending properly. "We've been so worried," my mother said, her voice trembling. "Not knowing if you were okay, not being able to help you." Like I was. Worried in the hospital, I interrupted, surprising myself with my directness, not knowing if my family was coming, not having help when I needed it most. The table fell silent. A barista called out, an order in the background. Someone laughed at a nearby table. "Madison, my father began. "We understand you're upset about the orientation, but this isn't about the orientation," I said evenly. "This is about a lifetime of being treated as less important than Bailey. The orientation was just the final straw." Mother shook her head. "That's not fair. We love both our daughters equally. Love isn't measured by words, Mom. It's measured by actions, and your actions have consistently shown that Bailey's needs, wants, and even whims come before anything happening in my life. Even a life-threatening car accident. I removed my phone from my purse and pulled up the selfie they'd sent from Bailey's dorm, placed it on the table between us. I was lying in a hospital bed with a shattered leg and concussion when you sent this. No mention of me. No acknowledgement that your other daughter was in crisis. Just celebration, as if nothing else mattered. My father had the decency to look ashamed. We made a mistake." "No," I corrected him. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the grocery store. This was a choice, one of many similar choices you've made throughout my life." I began listing examples, my voice steady despite the emotion behind my words. The missed graduation, the disparity in financial support, the forgotten birthdays alongside Bailey's elaborate celebrations, the calls cut short to accommodate Bailey's needs. The pattern was undeniable when laid out chronologically. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We never meant to make you feel less loved. Intent doesn't erase impact," I replied, a phrase my therapist had offered that resonated deeply. "Whether you meant to or not, the message I received my entire life was that I mattered less." "That's not true," my father protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? When have you ever prioritized me over Bailey? When have my achievements, my needs, my emergencies ever taken precedence?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again, unable to provide an example. "I don't blame Bailey," I continued. "She didn't create this dynamic. You did, and you reinforced it. Every time you dropped everything for her while expecting me to understand, to be mature, to handle things on my own. We're always so capable," my mother said defensively. "Bailey needed more guidance." "No, Bailey was allowed to need guidance. I was expected not to need anything." Conversation was interrupted by the coffee shop door opening. We all looked up to see Bailey herself walking in, scanning the room until she spotted us. "Bailey," my mother said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" I asked Madison where you were meeting. She said, approaching our table. "I thought I should be here for this conversation." I hadn't expected this development, but as Bailey pulled up a chair, I realized her presence might actually help drive my point home. Madison was just telling us how she feels. "We favored you." My father explained, a slight defensive edge to his voice. Bailey looked directly at him. "She's right." The simple statement hung in the air like a thunderclap. What? My mother asked. She's right, Bailey repeated. You've always favored me, and it's not fair to Madison. It's not fair to either of us, actually. My parents stared at her, clearly stunned by this betrayal from their favored child. I never wanted to be the favorite, Bailey continued. Do you know how much pressure that puts on me? How guilty I felt, watching Madison work twice as hard for half the recognition. How uncomfortable it makes me when you drop everything to solve my problems but expect her to handle things alone. I looked at my sister with new understanding. We'd never discussed this aspect of our family dynamic, both trapped in the roles assigned to us. I love you both, Bailey, said her voice softening. But Madison deserved better. She deserved parents who showed up for her surgery instead of my stupid orientation. I would have been fine on my own. I'm 25, not 5. Parents appeared genuinely speechless, glancing between us as their carefully constructed family narrative crumbled. Here's what's going to happen, I said, bringing the conversation back to my prepared points. I'm setting boundaries. I don't know what our relationship looks like moving forward, but I know it can't continue as it has been. I outlined my terms clearly. No more comparing Bailey and me. Acknowledgement of past favoritism, and a commitment to more balanced attention. I explained that I would be limiting contact for the next few months as I continued my physical and emotional healing. If you want to rebuild a relationship with me, it starts with respecting these boundaries, I concluded. No, dropping by unannounced, no guilt, trips, no acting like I'm being unreasonable for protecting myself. And if we don't agree with these boundaries, my father asked the concept clearly foreign to him. Then we don't have a relationship. I said simply, I'd rather have no parents than parents who continue to hurt me. Bailey reached across the table and took my hand. Gesture of solidarity that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I support Madison in this, she told our parents, and I'll be setting some boundaries of my own. My mother wiped her eyes visibly, struggling to process everything. We never realized, we never intended. I know, I said, softening slightly, but impact matters more than intent. You have a choice now. You can dismiss my feelings and continue as before, or you can do the hard work of examining your behavior and making real changes. As I stood to leave, using my crutches for balance, I felt lighter than I had in years. Whatever happened next, whether my parents rose to the occasion or not, I had finally spoken my truth. I was no longer the good daughter. Silently accepting scraps of attention I was Madison worthy of. Respect, consideration, and equal love. Bailey walked me out to where Amber was, waiting, leaving our parents at the table with much to consider. That was brave, my sister said quietly. It was necessary, I replied. For the first time in our adult lives, we were truly on the same side. Not as competitors for parental attention, but as sisters, supporting each other's growth and healing. The weeks following our confrontation were quiet. My parents respected my request for limited contact, though my mother sent occasional text messages, brief, cautious inquiries about my recovery that I answered with equal brevity. Bailey, however, became a more consistent presence in my life, visiting twice weekly as I continued physical therapy and gradually regained independence. They're struggling, she reported during one visit, stirring honey into her tea at my kitchen table. I had recently moved back to my apartment now, navigating with a walking boot instead of crutches. Dad's defensive. Keep saying, we're exaggerating. Mom's been crying a lot, looking through old photo albums. Are they actually reflecting? Or just feeling sorry for themselves? I asked Bailey. Considered this both. I think Mom asked me yesterday if I really felt they treated us differently. I told her to count how many photos of each of us are displayed in their house. There are 27 of me and exactly 3 of you, I snorted. Did she count? Yes. And then she cried. Again, Bailey sighed. I think she's genuinely horrified now that she's seeing it. Dad's having a harder time admitting it. 3 months after the accident, my parents suggested family therapy. I agreed, cautiously setting clear parameters. I would participate remotely until I felt comfortable being in the same room with them, and I reserved the right to end any session that became manipulative or unproductive. Dr. Levinson, the family therapist, was a straightforward woman in her 50s who established ground rules immediately. No interrupting, no dismissing others' feelings, and a commitment to honest reflection. Our first session was predictably difficult. I feel like Madison is punishing us for one mistake, my father began. One mistake, I echoed incredulously. Did you not hear anything? I said at the coffee shop. Dr. Levinson intervened. Robert, when you characterize your absence during Madison's medical emergency as one mistake, you're minimizing both the event itself and the pattern Madison has described. Can you try to understand why that's problematic? My father shifted uncomfortably. We've always supported both our daughters. Differently, Bailey interjected. You've supported us very differently. Conversation continued in this vein with my parents alternating between defensiveness and tentative acknowledgement. My mother admitted more readily than my father that there might have been inconsistencies in their parenting. We never meant to play favorites, she insisted tearfully. Madison was always so self-sufficient and Bailey needed more guidance. I wasn't self-sufficient by choice, I pointed out. I became self-sufficient because I learned early that I couldn't count on you the way Bailey could. By our third session, small breakthroughs began occurring. My father, prompted by Dr. Levinson to research family dynamics, reluctantly acknowledged that they had indeed demonstrated differential treatment. I still don't think it was as extreme as Madison describes. He qualified, but I can see how it might have felt that way to her. That's not quite taking responsibility, Dr. Levinson noted. But it's a start. In our individual sessions, Dr. Levinson helped me navigate my own complex emotions, the anger that sometimes threatened to consume me, the grief for the parental relationship I never had, and the tentative hope that real change might be possible. Healing doesn't mean forgetting, she reminded me. It means finding a way forward that honors your needs and boundaries. Meanwhile, my physical recovery progressed. By month 4, I was walking with only a slight limp, though long. Distances still required a cane. I returned to work part-time, finding unexpected support among colleagues who had rallied around me during my absence. 6 months after the accident, my parents took a step that surprised me. They sent a handwritten letter. Not a text, not an email, but an actual letter that had clearly taken time and thought to compose. Dear Madison, it began. We've been doing a lot of reflecting both in therapy and on our own. We want to acknowledge without qualification or excuse that we have treated you and Bailey differently throughout your lives. We failed to celebrate your achievements with the same enthusiasm we showed for Bailey's. We did not provide equal support, equal attention, or equal recognition of your needs. Most unforgivably, we weren't there when you needed us after your accident. We understand now that we created a family dynamic where Bailey was the center and you were relegated to the periphery. We failed to see how our actions communicated that you were somehow less important, less worthy of our time and attention. There is no justification for this, and we are profoundly sorry for the hurt we've caused. We don't expect forgiveness, and we understand that rebuilding trust, if you choose to allow, it will take time and consistent effort on our part. We are committed to that. Effort to examining our behaviors and biases, and to creating a more balanced family relationship where both our daughters feel equally valued, with love and deep regret. Mom and Dad. I read the letter several times, searching for the qualifiers and excuses I'd come to expect. Finding none, I shared it with Bailey and Dr. Levinson, both of whom agreed it represented a significant step forward. They're really trying, Bailey said. They've been reading books about family dynamics and favoritism. Dad even joined an online support group for parents estranged from adult children. I remained cautiously optimistic. Were important, but actions would tell the true story. Over the following months, my parents began demonstrating concrete changes. They respected my boundaries without complaint. They acknowledged important events in my life, sending thoughtful gifts for my birthday and calling to celebrate when I was cleared to return to work full-time. Most significantly, they began treating Bailey and me with more noticeable parity. They actually turned down Bailey's invitation to help her move apartments because they'd already committed to having dinner with me that weekend. I told Amber, still somewhat surprised by this development. They suggested she reschedule for the following weekend. Holy shit, Amber replied eloquently. Flying pigs must be migrating south for the winter. I laughed, but the shift was meaningful. For the first time, my parents had prioritized a commitment to me over Bailey's immediate needs. It was a small thing, perhaps, but symbolically significant. 9 months after the accident, I agreed to attend a family dinner at my parents' house. The first time I'd been there since before the crush. Walking in, I immediately noticed changes. New photos had been added to the walls, creating a more balanced visual history of our family. My academic achievements, previously stored in albums, now held prominent places alongside Bailey's sports trophies. We've been reviewing old videos and photos, my mother explained. Noting my observation, it was eye-opening to see the disparity in documentation. The dinner was awkward at times, but not unpleasant. My parents made visible efforts to engage equally with Bailey, and me asking thoughtful questions about my work and listening attentively to my responses. After dinner, my father asked if I would take a walk with him, just the two of us. We strolled slowly through their neighborhood, my occasional limp permanent reminder of the accident that had catalyzed our family's reckoning. "Want you to know," he said after several minutes of silence, "that I'm deeply ashamed of not being there after your accident. There's no excuse and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." It was the most direct, unqualified apology he'd ever offered me. "Why, Billy?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for years. Why was she always the priority? He considered this, clearly struggling to articulate something he was only beginning to understand himself. Daily reminded me of my younger sister. Finally said, "The one who died when I was 12 and she was 9. Same personality. Spirited, struggling, needing constant guidance. I think I was trying to save her through Bailey." It wasn't a justification, but it was an insight that helped me begin to comprehend the complex psychological underpinnings of our family dynamic. And me, I asked, where did I fit in this scenario? "You were so capable, so reliable," he said, "like I tried to be after my sister died. I think I took that for granted. Expected, it reinforced it. I never realized what it was doing to you in the process." We walked in silence for a while, digesting this revelation. "I'm trying to be better," he said finally. "I know it might be too little too late, but I want you to know I'm trying. I see that I acknowledged, and I did." As we turned back toward the house, I realized that while I wasn't ready to fully forgive, I was ready to continue the journey toward healing, not just my leg, but my relationship with the parents who had hurt me and who were at last beginning to understand the depth of that hurt. 1 year after the accident that changed everything, I stood in the living room of my new house, a modest but charming 2-bedroom craftsman with a small garden and a front porch. Perfect. For morning coffee, I'd purchased it entirely on my own, using savings I'd accumulated over years of careful financial planning and the promotion I'd received 6 months prior to department head at the hospital's physical therapy unit. My leg had healed as well as could be expected. I walked it with a barely perceptible limp, noticeable only when I was tired or the weather turned cold and damp. The titanium rod would remain in my tibia, permanently setting off airport metal detectors and serving as a tangible reminder of both trauma and recovery. The emotional healing had been more complex but equally significant through continued therapy. Both individual and family new patterns had gradually replaced old ones. My parents, to their credit, had maintained their commitment to change. The transformation wasn't perfect. Old habits occasionally resurfaced, requiring gentle but firm correction, but the difference was undeniable. My mother called regularly now, asking about my work and actually listening to my responses. My father had taken an interest in my home buying process, offering practical advice without attempting to control my decisions. They remembered my birthday, celebrated my achievements, and acknowledged my needs with a consistency that still sometimes surprised me most. Importantly, they no longer placed Bailey's desires automatically at the center of every family interaction. Bailey herself had flourished under this new dynamic, completing her degree program finally and establishing clearer boundaries of her own. Our relationship as sisters had deepened, no longer distorted by competition for parental attention. "It's weird," Bailey confessed. "During my housewarming party, the two of us momentarily alone in the kitchen. So long, I defined myself by being their focus. I didn't realize how limiting that was until it changed. We were both limited by the roles they assigned us." I replied, arranging cheese on a platter. "You as the needy one, me as the invisible one." "Not invisible anymore," she said, bumping my shoulder affectionately. Indeed, my journey toward visibility had extended beyond family. The experience had transformed how I approached all relationships, professional and personal. I spoke up more at work, advocated for my patients with greater conviction, and stopped minimizing my own achievements. This newfound confidence had led to unexpected developments in my personal life as well. Dr. Nathan Reynolds, the orthopedic surgeon who had pieced my leg back together, had asked me to coffee. Months after my final follow-up appointment, what began as professional admiration had evolved into friendship and eventually romance. Nathan understood trauma and recovery from both a medical and personal perspective. Having lost his father to cancer as a teenager, he respected my boundaries, supported my ongoing family, healing work, and never made me feel as though my emotional needs were burdensome. "Your parents are watching." "You again," he murmured in my ear as we rejoined the housewarming party. I followed his gaze to see my mother and father standing near the fireplace, observing me with expressions I'd rarely seen directed my way throughout my childhood. Unmistakable pride. Later, after the guests had departed and Nathan had stayed behind to help clean up, my parents lingered as well, clearly wanting to speak with me privately. Nathan tactfully excused himself to take out the recycling. Leaving the three of us alone in my new living room, we have something for you, my mother said, retrieving a large flat package from beside the couch, a housewarming gift. I unwrapped it carefully to find a framed collage of photographs, images of me throughout my life, from infancy to recent months. Me taking my first steps graduating from high school and college, working with patients, standing with my team at the hospital, moments large and small that I hadn't realized had been captured at all. We found these while going through old albums and boxes, my father explained. We realized we had documented your life more than we remembered, but we'd kept the evidence. Tucked away instead of celebrating it, I traced my fingers over the images, emotion tightening my throat. There's a letter in the back, my mother added softly. Behind the frame, I found an envelope containing a handwritten note. Madison, as you build this new home and this new chapter of your life, we want you to know that our greatest regret is not fully seeing you sooner. The remarkable woman you've become, compassionate, resilient, principled, is a testament to your character, not our parenting. We are sorry for every time we made you feel less important, less valued, less loved. We cannot change the past, but we promise to be better parents in the present and future. You deserve nothing less. With love, admiration, and profound respect, Mom and Dad. I couldn't speak for several moments, overwhelmed by emotions. I couldn't quite name, not quite forgiveness, not quite reconciliation, but something approaching peace. Thank you, I said finally. This means a lot. As they prepared to leave, my father paused at the door. We're proud of you, Madison. Not just for what you've accomplished, but for having the courage to hold us accountable. You've made all of us better. After they'd gone, Nathan returned, surveying my tear-stained face with concern. You okay? I'm getting there. I said honestly, it's a process. Later that night, as we sat on my new porch, watching fireflies illuminate the summer darkness, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The physical pain had been excruciating but finite. The emotional pain had been deeper, but ultimately transformative. I had lost the comforting illusion of a perfect family, but gained an authentic one instead, imperfect still. Healing but real, I had discovered my voice, and learned that using it, though frightening, could lead to profound change. I had built a life filled with people who valued me exactly as I was, not as an afterthought or a reliable background character, but as a protagonist in my own story. My shattered leg had mended, leaving scars, but also strength. My family had fractured and begun to heal in new configurations, the breaks creating space for honest communication and genuine connection. Nothing was perfect, but everything was more authentic than it had been before. Sometimes the most devastating breaks lead to the most necessary healing. Sometimes you have to shatter completely to rebuild something stronger. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most deeply can, if they're willing to do the work, become the people who help you heal. I still had difficult days when old resentment surfaced. I still maintained boundaries that would have been unthinkable before the accident. But I was no longer defined by what I lacked. Parental attention equals standing acknowledgement of my worth. Instead, I was defined by what I had built. A career helping others heal relationships based on mutual respect and the courage to demand better from the people who claim to love me. That broken leg hadn't just changed my family dynamics, it had set me free. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members? How did it change your relationship? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey, please consider hitting that like button, subscribing to hear more stories, and sharing this with someone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand up for yourself, especially when it's your own family you're standing up to. Thank you for being here, and I wish you strength on your own healing journey, whatever form it may take.